Next, we're going to move on to kind of density and the type of missions. So in this area, you do have two main objectives that you need to go through, and I believe that was the courthouse and I believe it was a church or a synagogue. I can't remember. It was a religious building, I believe, though, so I do apologize. So these are kind of the two main locations that the player has to go off and investigate, if we will. But not only that, you will have kind of other kind of areas the player can explore. Now, in terms of density, sometimes the choice here will not just come from that of the design, but also in terms of optimization for the game as well. In terms of how we did this in Division, we had to have 75 meters between that of your kind of side missions away from each other, as well as main missions had to have this kind of 75-meter radius away from them for optimization reasons. Now, obviously, if it was interior versus exterior, you could get away with kind of shorter distances, but it was these kind of rules that worked best for optimization. Not only that, but it can come from the design of the main and the critical path. Now, it's down to sometimes... Now, this is a hub world, but if you're making an open world game, it'll be like the open world designer or director who kind of is picking the time between that of experiences. If you think of that of Witcher 3, think about how, because you're riding on a horse, so you travel much faster, which is something you have to consider as well, because you cover more distance on a horse, a car, or a vehicle compared to on foot. But what you find there is they will kind of make a experiment where they first will put what they think is a right distance, and then time when the player can actually interact with something in the world, whether that just even means finding loot, getting into combat, kind of a traversal puzzle. All of these elements they'll think about, and they time it and then measure out, okay, well, was this too short? Was there enough space in terms of pacing? And sometimes it'll come up to something like, just as an example, a rule might be, oh yes, we need to make sure that they hit some kind of challenge every 3 minutes, every 5 minutes, every 2 minutes. They'll make that choice, and then that's how you kind of build around it. Now, I mention that because, as I mentioned, this is a hub world, so it's slightly different. They kind of control what the player is going to see at all times, where, as I mentioned with Division, the player had different kind of elements where there might be kind of these side missions, but what we also had was these looping giant patrols. And sometimes the patrols might be a different faction to the side missions, so then these two enemies would attack each other. Other times they might act almost as in reinforcements. They see that enemies of the same faction are down, and then they see the player, and it feels more like it's part of the mission. And it keeps it kind of lively because the systems interact so well. Or with the hub world of Last of Us 2, they're very much in control about which enemies are where they stay put, how far can they travel away, and kind of where is the chance of overlap. They're really in control versus a bit more open world, and even with the GTA franchise, it's very based solely on its systems, and GTA for sure has some of the best system design in the games industry, and how it all makes the things feel alive. Now, in Last of Us 2, they have different kind of missions. We talked about it there in terms of how we did it in Division, as well as that in GTA 5. But that's one of the things that really helps to build in terms of challenge, but also build on the world. In certain parts, you'll see kind of building more on the environmental storytelling, where you'll find loot and notes, but there will be no enemies. You see kind of where this highway has crashed and been destroyed, but you see armored trucks around them close to it, and seeing what has happened there, and that there is a truck locked. The aliens didn't break into it. You get more parts, but there isn't anything in terms of challenge for combat. But you see it, you hear one of the characters comment on it, and these kind of elements again, brilliant for building narrative. They know that there's going to be a lot of combat in the main missions as well as some of the other side activities. So by having your different kind of mission types, you find that you can have a nice kind of pacing control. and also make things feel more memorable because of the fact that not everything is based on combat or not everything's based on a certain puzzle challenge, right? Not only that, but what they do really well with their types of missions is some will actually overlap. So you might find a key, like in this example, you find a key in a bathroom, and that leads to I believe it was a pet store, but it had been taken over by what I think was either by Fedra or it was by the Washington Wolf faction that you're in hunt for, and you get to kind of get a bit more detail on who they are as well as how they work as a group too. So very, very good stuff there. And that's great as well because you want kind of information to overlap with the main story. You want that as a designer because the more that you have on that, the more the world feels fleshed out and more detailed from it. Now, one of the things that I noticed with their density is they keep a lot of it kind of close together, very much on the main path. So there's there's many terms used for this. You can call it the golden path, the critical path, or the main path. I think we'll just call it the critical path. I tend to use golden path, but I know some people use golden path to describe the way to like extra loot. So for this purpose of this podcast, critical path is the main route that the player will follow in order to complete and move forward with the narrative. Golden path is more optional to find loot, and we'll call side paths that will lead to your side missions, for example. Now, most of their side missions are put on the critical path, and I think the reason for that is because of the fact that they know that the two locations I mentioned earlier, players have to visit them in order to go progress into the story. So with the fact that a lot of work has gone into this hub space, not only by art, design, but a lot of resources have been put into it, they want the player to explore. So they've kind of put it kind of closer together compared to what I mentioned with Division, because I think in terms of optimization, as I said, they don't need to worry about random enemies walking out and catching the player off guard. They're very much in control in how the level actually works itself. Now, from that then, kids, they play around, should we say, in terms of height as well. The music shop you can actually enter from two ways, down at the ground level or up as well on the, you can climb through onto the second floor through that of I think it was a lockdown gate. You go across the bridge and make your way through it that way. And this is another thing. We talked about using a horse or a vehicle, if you will, to travel through the space. But the reason they obviously give access to the player at different heights is they want the player to come off the horse. They want the player to get off and offer traversal challenges. So you feel the difference between when you're riding on a horse versus that of just on your feet yourself. So those kind of cool elements for it. They have different types of missions. They have nice moments where you're rewarded not only just in loot, but whether that be intel on the enemies you're looking for, or if it's a nice story beat with Dina and Ellie kind of building their relationship. So I thought it was really good overall with how they've paced it out. There are some more on the kind of the branching areas, but I do notice that they are more cluttered together. They're kept close for a reason, which is by no means is a critique. It's just fascinating to see the difference again, just showing you the difference between a hub world and an open world.